Okay, go.
We are right now going to learn how to do a welt pocket. And the first step is to cut 2 rectangles. I'm going to screw this up at the bottom and cut a rectangle 8 by 12. So this is my 8 on this line. Would somebody mind handing me a fabric weight? It's on that shelf where the rulers are. I'm going to make it 12 here. Thank you. And I'm going to cut on this fold, so I have 2 of those. But you really only need 1. You also need a piece that's smaller than that for your pocketing. I'm going to make it about 7 by 12. Oh, I should have brushed that table. And I will have 2 of those too for someone who wants theirs cut out. Now for each of those, we need a piece of interfacing that is about 4 inches wide, and then the length that this is wide. So I'm going to cut, I can actually cut 4 of those at once and give one to somebody. I do this. So I'm going to cut that fold off and cut them 4 inches. And even 7 inches would be enough. But 2 8s and 2 7s would help us get the width we need. Okay, so these are going to go on here, and these are going to go on here. And I only need 1 of each. So I'm going to separate those. And we learned about interfacing that there's a this is fusible interfacing. So there's a sticky side with little glue dots, and there's a side without glue dots. You always want the glue dots to be face down. On this pocket, I want to go a little lower than center. This is the whole pocket piece. We'll eventually fold it in half and turn it into a pocket. So if I put it in the center, it would be uneven at the bottom when we're done. You'll see why. So I'm going to fuse that right there. Thank you. And then I'm going to fuse this one right in the middle, and this will be my, supposedly, my coat or wherever the pocket is going. Okay? So let's go fuse them, and then we will draw our pattern on there. And I need this and this. And I forgot to shut my cutting wheel. Come on over here. So it's the narrower one that will be the pocket, and this is a little down from center. To fuse interfacing, I usually steam it so it shrinks a little and then stick it down. And I steam it for 2 or 3 seconds and then hold the iron on it for about 10 to make it permanently adhere to melt all that glue. You have to hold it in every spot for about 10 seconds. Make sure when you're doing this, which I'm about to, that none of your interfacing goes beyond your fabric, or it's going to stick to the ironing board, or if you had done it upside down, it'd be sticking to the iron, and you don't want any of that. So I'm going to trim this so it can't do that. And this little piece, if I leave it about there, guess what happens?
It's fused to
Someone
the
sticks
ironing
it
board.
to the iron generally.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, now we were going to sew right sides together. So this is the right side of the pocket, the right side of the suit, and I want to mark the right side of the suit and the wrong side of the pocket. I'm going to make a pocket opening, let's say 5 inches wide. That's going to be big enough for my hand. So this is exactly in the center where the pocket goes. I want to mark exactly the end stops. And I mark them beyond my square because it makes it easier for me to sew later. I'm going to be sewing a 1/2 inch away from this center line when I make my welts. So I'm marking this a 1/2 inch. Actually, most welts are really 1/4 of an inch wide, but for your ease in being able to learn to do this, I'm making them a 1/2 inch wide. And then I showed you the sample of how you can make them 1/8 of an inch or less, and it's a buttonhole. So it's all the same process, just how big you make it and how wide, how long, how short. So that's going to be my welt shape and size for today. Now this one, can you hand me a pen or pencil? Since this is the back and I can't see white chalk on here, I'm going to do this one with a pen. But I'm going to do it the exact same way, if it'll write. You want something that can create a precise line. And the reason I mark way beyond, when you see it under a presser foot, you can't see it if the foot's covering this much of it, so I need it clear out here. And again, the 1/2 inch. Okay, so mine is not exactly centered, but yours could be if you choose to. I could have put this over another 1/4 of an inch and be in the center, but all of this is excess anyway. So I'm okay with it. Now, I told you I want to sew right sides together, but I have these 2 markings to line up. Could you hand me some pins, please, Carol? And I'm going to pin them together so exactly these corners match exactly these corners. It's corners that really matter in this project. So I'm going to pin through that corner and this corner and come out on that corner and that corner to hold those exactly lined up. And you know, this probably would be just as easy with a 1/4 inch welt if you want to try it. It's more real to what you'd be doing. I've seen 1/2 inch welts in garments, but 1/4 inch is more standard. Okay, so now those are all lined up. I'm ready to sew them. Let's try that machine. See if we can get to it. Are you all remembering this? Does it come back to you? Give me a tail big enough to grab here. Now remember I told you I don't want to start right on a corner. I want to start a little ways down one side so that all my corners are nice and clean and square corners. And then I'm going to overlap here where I'm starting when I come back. Now make sure your needle is lined up with the mark on your foot. This one isn't. So I'm going to guide by the needle, not the mark on the foot. And make sure the needle's going down in the line. Now I'm ready to take this out. I don't want to hit it, but I want my needle to go right in that corner. So if I have to either shorten the stitch, thank you, or do a stitch by hand, let's see if it's in that corner. I think it is. And then pivot, go to the next one. Make sure the last entry is right on the line. Now I'm ready to do my final corner and overlap. So if I overlap those 5 stitches-ish, then it won't come undone. Now one thing I did for the first demonstration I haven't done here, and you're welcome to do it if it helps you, and I will do it if you can hand me the pen again, is draw the cut line. I'm going to cut down the center, but I don't want to cut all the way to the back end. I want to angle from here to the corners. And the key thing about this step is to cut exactly to that stitching on the corner. It's really critical. So I usually start it like this till I can get my needle in, my scissors in, and then you're going all the way through all the layers. And cut down this line only to the Y, and then go to each corner separately. And whatever it takes to cut to the stitching but not through it. Having a contrasting thread would have helped. I can't see the stitching. It's blending. But then that would show in the final product on a real product. Now when you start to turn this around, you'll know if you clip to the corner, because if you didn't, it won't turn. So let's go test it. Back to the ironing board. I like to iron this step because I can see it clearly and I can help it. The actual goal will be to turn all of this pocketing inside that hole and have a square. But I begin that by ironing one side at a time, nice and flat. And actually notice I'm ironing the seam allowance towards the center of the pocket, right where it came from. But the reason I'm ironing it there, even though it belongs there, is because I'm trying to iron this layer. I'm trying to get this nice and flat. This seam. And that will help me make perfect welts. So I'm just trying to get all the seam allowances in the same direction towards center. The way to always make sure your seam allowance is flat and open is to put a little stretch on it. So see, my goal was to get this all pressed flat. Now I'm going to work on the side corners a little bit and do the same thing to them. Although they're going to press out this way, so maybe I will do it flat. Now these, I don't want to press them back right now. Although you could make that perfect window and then press them forward again. They're going to end up centered. They're going to end up folded towards each other. But I want them out of my way so I can make this side of the box perfect. And this side. And it looks like I clipped to the corners because they're corners. Okay, so now I'm going to let this fall forward and this wrap around it. and do the same with this one, and they should all meet right in the center of that window box. And I'm going to press them there. So basically I created little pleats on the sides. And let's see how it's looking from here. I do not like this being not straight. I gotta repress that a little. It's not being the perfect corner I know it can be yet. Give it just a little more steam. And it's a little beyond the seam allowance. So I'm gonna make sure at this point that these two lips, we call them, these two welts, are the very same size. I don't know if you saw, but it felt like it wasn't. Now, this is another thing I'm going to correct right now. See, my seam line is right here, but my little triangle is sticking out just a little too much. So I'm going to grab it and pull it a little harder and press that on the seam line. There we go. Now I'm happy, ready to stitch again. So this is all unattached. These lips aren't connected yet, but I'm going to go stitch right here in the ditch, or you could top stitch it if you wanted it to show. I'm going to stitch this down so that it will all stay in place, and then we'll create a pocket. And this stitch in the ditch might really show because it's contrasting thread. I still want that back a little. I will pull it back when I stitch it. So, okay, this is one way. Another way that I did show you in class is if you didn't want the support of this whole seam allowance giving strength to this welt, because it's going to be inside here, you could fold one of them back like this, and now you only have a thinner welt, but you could stitch on it to close this seam instead of in the ditch, and then it will never show. This is actually a good option. I may do that this time. Let's do that one. So I'm stitching next to the first stitching, and the wonderful thing is that now, oh, I'll press it again. Now all this is attached and it can't get free like this bottom one still is free. This bottom one still is free. I will demonstrate that one in the ditch just so you know the difference. And when you're going in the ditch, try to really stretch it sideways so that it kind of comes back on your stitching to hide it. And of course you do have to be exactly in that line. And then if that thread matched, I don't think you'd see it there. Now we almost have a pocket. We have a pocket opening, and the top of my pocket now is the longer piece of fabric. Which one did I say was the top? This one. So at the top you will fold all of this down. And that way you have two layers here. No, I didn't get it off-centered enough, but it's okay. My pocket's going to be a vest pocket. You want these, you wanted these two to be roughly the size of your pocket. See my pocket? I'm going to sew this shut around. I really want to do one more pressing after I did that open seam. It's not as flat anymore. Okay, so to sew my pocket shut, I'm going to sew over this little triangle, around the pocket bag, and back over the other little triangle. But the most important thing here is that I'm sewing right on the triangle, on the side seam of my square, and that this is folded right on the seam allowance. And that one's working fine, actually. And don't catch any of the rest of that. Keep it out of your stitching. Okay, down to the bottom, over. Keep those little pleats always in there. I'm going to come up on the other side seam of the other triangle and keep that out of the way. There. Now I will probably press it again because I put wrinkles in. But there's my pocket, big enough for a little stopwatch, pocket watch, and with 2 1/2-inch welts and flat corners, but I will press them again so they're better. And that's how you make a pocket welt. Any questions? These are really fun if you do